Hi everyone, and welcome to Copilot Lead Speak. I'm your host, Sarah Young, and throughout this series, I have the privilege of showcasing some of the leading figures in the AI security field. In this video, I'm excited to talk to Hyrum Anderson. Welcome, Hyrum.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great to be here.
Oh, no, I am so excited that you're here, Hyrum. So before we get into things, please tell our viewers, who are you? Why are you on the couch? And what do you do?
Okay, my name's Hyrum, and I'm an AI security researcher, and I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer at Robust Intelligence, which is an AI security company.
So, Hyrum, I have read your books, I know your work, but for our audience, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I work in AI security, and that's a thing now. It didn't used to be a thing, really.
And it's still it's quite niche at the moment.
It's kind of a small thing. But the reason it's a thing is because AI is changing software. And so it's also changing security. And we need to secure that software. So I work at Robust Intelligence, and we're a company who focuses on that security element of AI systems.
That's awesome. And you've done quite a lot of research as well.
I have, yes.
And can you tell us, maybe for the less academically minded, a little bit about what your research has involved?
Well, I came into AI security because I was involved in developing AI tools to detect threats. And when you're in this cybersecurity space, you quickly realize there's a who, not a what, that's trying to evade these tools. And this is where AI security came from for me. When there's an attacker trying to get around the defenses you put in place, you come across this, cat and mouse game where AI is the defender and the human is the attacker. And you realize in all the ways that an attacker can make AI go wrong. So this is how it started for me. That's where my research began. The field has been around much longer than I have. We can talk about the history perhaps later. But I feel really lucky that this has become a thing today, largely because of the amazing advances of AI.
Okay, so I'm going to maybe go back in time a little bit, because you've been researching and involved in this field, even though it is pretty new. I think you'd still probably be considered a veteran, I'd say. So, Hyrum, can you tell us a little bit about the history of AI security research, how it started back in the day?
Yeah, there's actually kind of two paths that merged, and one came sort of like me, even though my technical training's in machine learning. The first thread came from cybersecurity. And back in 2004 was some of the very first machine learning tools used to, guess what, detect spam and email. And some academic studies showed how that could be defeated by an adversary, those models. So the 2004 is kind of, in my mind, some of the real emergence of practical adversarial machine learning. Fast forward almost 10 years later, separately in the pure machine learning community, people started to notice these remarkable properties about machine learning that especially in images, that by very careful manipulation of these images, to you and I, the image looks unchanged. But to a modern machine learning classifier, the classification, the prediction now changes wildly, like from a bus to a gibbon.
Yeah.
Or from a cat to guacamole.
Yeah, because the famous one is panda versus into gibbon, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And what was the other thread that came in there?
The first thread was the security thread. And about the same time as people from the security angle were attacking some kinds of machine learning models, this separate discovery about intriguing properties of machine learning models also came on the scene in 2014. So they kind of merged there. And if you're looking for, the drama of I did it first, no, I did, it never happened. These were very cordial researchers who just wrote, they linked up, and now there's one field of adversarial machine learning.
Yeah. And when those fields kind of merged together, how has the research gone from there? Obviously you said there were these two threads, but how did it start to develop as kind of its one field? Because 2014 is only 10 years ago, which is not long in tech terms.
Right. Well, for the longest time, adversarial machine learning or security of AI has meant a very model-centric view. And so a model is a summary of data. It's not an application. It's kind of the heart of an AI application. And it's been very focused on just the model. Fast forward to today, what's changed most is how, in my view, is how we think about AI security as not just the model-centric view, that's the heart of it, but also when you start building applications around AI, what are the other elements of security that you have to think about? Because oftentimes the security vulnerabilities are in the cracks between system components, as we know. And that can't be more true than in modern AI applications.
Hyrum, one of the themes that you mentioned in the book that you co-wrote, and obviously an important thing that lots of people are thinking about at the moment, is the trust side of AI. Can you trust the answers AI gives you, or can you trust what it's doing? And of course, trust is a big foundation in security generally. So can you give me your thoughts on that side of things?
Yeah, security is about trust. Mm-hmm. There's a long history of humans trusting machines. It's called the automation bias. When something is automated, you tend to rely on it to do the thing that it's been set up to do. When it comes to AI, when it comes to machine learning systems, this can sometimes be problematic. So two things to point out, and I want to give an example of one. Humans trust AI, and in some cases they overtrust it. There's this fascinating experiment done in a university setting where participants were brought in to supposedly fill out a survey, and they were greeted by a robot who would direct them to a room. And this is all laid out in the book. And while taking them to the room, the experiment designers, kind of behind the curtains, had caused this robot to do weird things, go in a loop-de-loop, take them to the wrong room, do things that were intentionally signaling that you shouldn't trust this robot. Anyway, this faux survey takes place. A fire alarm goes off, a fake one, and this goofy robot comes, smoke, flashing lights, follow me, and it also, it takes a few wrong turns, some loop-de-loops, yet most people tend to follow the robot out to the exit signs eventually. So what does it show? Generally speaking, I think we tend to put a lot of trust in automation that extends to AI. In fact, when we see that AI is good at one thing, we tend to extend that trust capability beyond what the AI was programmed to do. So on the other hand, when we see it fail, we often ascribe that failure to being task-specific. Let me just back up. Failures we ascribe to being task-specific, and successes we usually too broaden to be general, right? That's kind of our bias in trust. So why is trust important? Trust is foundational to security. And we can talk a lot about what that means today for AI applications.
Now, in particular, just because I think this is what a lot of our viewers will be the most familiar with, is LLMs, so large language models. And of course, we trust a lot of people are trusting some of the output. And already in the media, there's been some numerous interesting cases of how people have asked it a question and it's given them some answers that have not been trustworthy at all. But as a researcher, and I've read a few academic papers, probably the more simple ones, could you talk a little bit about actually how LLMs work and why we should always question their output?
LLMs are amazing. And I'm pro LLM. And I think they're amazing. There's one point, in fact, where I had a web service go down in my code, and I turned to an LLM for convenience and getting exactly what to do to bring it back up quickly, right? And that was a moment for me when I realized how much trust I was putting in an LLM versus going to a search engine, looking for the right links, right? I wanted the answer. So LLMs are really interesting because basically they're just predicting the next word, but they're doing it with an incredible amount of context. Today's LLMs can fit essentially a whole book in context, the largest ones, in order to predict the next word. And how do they do that? They're essentially doing this, sentence diagramming to understand all of the relationships between words that are in its context. And then they predicts the next word, and then wrap that new word back into the context and predicts the next one. So think of your phone on autocomplete, except now it has this very sophisticated AI machinery that's piecing together how all these bits of information that it's already talked about or that was provided to it fit in how it's providing an answer. So what's remarkable to me is that LLMs and their applications are based on predicting the next word, given a load of information that I'm steering you to, go on and on about.
Yeah, it's really, they are incredible. I want to say incredible bits of kit. That's the phrase my mother would use, but incredible technology is probably a more articulate way of saying it. Now, shifting gears a little bit, let's bring us back to today. So as someone who's running an AI company and who is also a researcher, what are you most concerned about from an AI security perspective? I know it's a very rapidly changing field, but I'm asking most of our guests, what should your average person or someone who's thinking about starting to use AI technologies be worried about from a security perspective?
I like to talk about the very same traditional security violations that have always been around. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, and let's add one, abuse. And abuse is particularly interesting in the LLM case because these can be repurposed to do things. So when I think about companies building AI applications, I like to think about what are the risks that they are bringing on themselves in these 4 areas by exposing this LLM application to their users. So confidentiality, if the model was trained on data, a model is just a summary of that data, and you can actually play games to get the data back out, right? So data security has been a thing for a long time, but here's this new wrinkle. I don't even need access to your database. You give me access to your chat bot, and I can maybe figure out how to tease out some of that data. Integrity, of course, is, can I change the behavior of the application that's being used today? So today's chatbots or retrieval augmented generations have specific instructions about how to behave, what to say, how to gracefully decline when they're prompted to do something malicious. But, attackers can evade, they can affect the integrity of that system by asking in the right way. Availability, of course, that's how do we keep uptime in my system, and the abuse thing we talked about already. How can prevent an attacker from repurposing this powerful capability to do something that you never intended it to do? All of this, to me, boils down to this question you asked earlier, Sarah, and that's about trust. Trust in the trust boundary that we put around these models, giving them access to the data that will in turn be exposed to users. Those are kind of the fundamental issues that might need more thinking today for people who are serious about building in security into their applications.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of, if we talked a little bit more specifically about not talking about any particular product, but security controls, are there any security controls that you would, or capabilities that you think folks should be prioritizing if they're building AI-enabled applications?
Yeah, and first, let me just step back. Before we get to technology, let's talk about organization and process and mindset.
It's true. You're right.
Right.
Security controls are not just technical.
Yes. So I like to encourage companies who are building AI to have a risk management framework. And that basically is a mindset to evaluate and return again and evaluate what you're doing to measure and understand the risks of these AI systems. That's number one. So controls can be policies. Am I checking for certain things? And there's a bunch of technology controls. As you look about the things that you can do for these AI systems, number one, you can design with security in mind. You can just try your best to make sure that your LLM application is aligned to say the right kind of thing in the right tone of voice, etc., and not spill information. It's insufficient. There has to be other checks. Another great control to have is to do AI stress testing. It's a way to, before you release your application, to kind of do an assessment. Let's poke holes and understand all the ways that this can go wrong. How can what are the weaknesses that could elicit this CIAA, these violations? There are guardrails in place that you can use to patch some of those. And there are also firewalls and other post-deployment considerations that you can put in place to prevent some of this behavior from happening. I mentioned a stack of technologies and a process of that instills trust in a system. All of these are necessary. This is back to fundamentals of defense in depth that are so appropriate when we're talking about AI systems.
Yeah. Do you think it would be fair to say, because this is my take from what I've learned in the AI security space so far, that in fact, we're not fundamentally at a high level doing anything much differently to how we would do security for other types of systems? The high level principles, risk assessment, controls, policies, whether it's people, process, etc. We still need to do all of those things, but we just need to do it for AI as well. There's not something magical and new that's going to magically secure our AI, at least at the moment.
Right. I think yes and no. I mean, if you think about it, AI is software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But AI is also changing software. So all of the things that apply to software apply to AI. What's net new about this? There's a few things, and there are wrinkles that need to be applied to these existing processes so that they become totally suitable to this new AI paradigm. So what's new? There's now data that's informing a model. There's a new supply chain considerations. Today, if you're building a model, you're not building one from scratch. You are inheriting from a third party, be it open source or a service provider. And so there's another trust issue, right? Should I be using this? What am I, by accepting this model, what are the risks I'm accepting with it? So those are the things that are really challenging. If I were doing this for software, I could presumably inspect code. I could, fix a bug when there's a patch to be made. In AI, unfortunately, these are bugs that can't be patched, right? They can be partially plugged. These are non-deterministic, meaning that the model's behavior isn't necessarily the same every time I use the model. So they're really gnarly to deal with, and that adds some new wrinkles to these very, the right way to handle these things are well known. The new wrinkles are where we need to be a little bit wiser about when we're dealing with AI security.
Hyrum, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, because, well, it's super exciting. I have somebody on my couch who can talk about this, is the AI security standards. Now, they're still very quickly developing. It's still quite new, but I know that you've actually participated in some of the NIST standards that are coming out. So I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on how companies can and organizations can maybe try and align with something that's still in progress, very much a work in progress? Because, of course, normally we're used to organizations having well-established standards that they can refer to when they're building things, which isn't the case here.
Correct. And there's a lot happening on the standards front. The part I participated in was a taxonomy, which I think is foundational. It's a way to think about threats, failure modes for machine learning models, what an attacker can do, and it gives us a language that we can communicate in about them. So how can you get ahead? Even while these standards are forthcoming or being refined, there's actually lots of stuff to do already. Number one, NIST AI risk management framework. The only thing that's going to be different for security people who already have a risk management framework is the AI piece, and it's honestly not that different than what you've seen previously. It still has these basic principles about measuring, mapping, governing that help you to establish a process. This is something you get ahead of early. Again, these RMFs are not something you check a box. It's something you apply, right? So the act of doing this will force you to confront, what are my risks in my organization? How do I control for them? Then this taxonomy will give you the language to talk about that. You can map, for example, a indirect prompt injection to the application that you're developing or using in your organization and understand what controls you might put in place for that.
Yeah, and are there any other standard policies, legislation that have just come out or that are coming out that you think that organizations should keep an eye on?
Definitely, you should be watching the EU AI Act and the executive order. Even though the White House executive order has come out, I think there's still a lot to be said about how it's implemented and put in practice. For most people, it's going to have a trickle-down effect. It won't impact directly. It's affecting people who develop models that are very large or have some specific purpose, and regulating how those models are put into place, some of these exact kinds of checks that we've talked about, how they should do third-party testing on them, for example. These are things to watch because always it seems that when things happen at that level, there's this long tail of trickle down that affects everybody. If you were to, forecast in the future, you could see how more and more, not just the big companies, but all companies would have these practices in place where they vet and verify the models that they are using in their applications, for example. Even though it's not mandated for them, that's something that they probably should be doing.
So, Hyrum, it has been awesome talking to you, but just before you go, one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of materials out there are very, very academic, and some of them very mathematical, which is definitely not my thing, or they're very, very high level. And I think there's a big group of us that sit in the middle that are trying to learn more about AI security. So do you have any recommendations for materials and resources that are kind of for those of us who sit in the middle a little bit?
One great, we've already mentioned the NIST taxonomy. It's called the NIST Adversarial Machine Learning Taxonomy. Does a great job of summarizing, honestly, hundreds of papers. It came out in early 2024 by colleagues at NIST and Northeastern and at Robust Intelligence. And it summarizes all of these threat vectors, bidding them into things that you can kind of wrap your mind around. So that's a great place to start if you want to know the technical terms and a language to speak about this. If you want even a broader view, I could recommend the book that Ram Shankar Subkumar and I have authored. Again, Ram did 90 to 95% of the authoring or more. He's really the driver of this, and I was so delighted to partner with him. In this book, we talk about stories like the robot story, overtrusting. We talk about specific failures observed in the industry of these machine learning, how attackers, both the kind of the Davids and the Goliaths of adversaries have attacked machine learning models. We talk about policies. We talk about risk management and where we're going forward. It's a great place to start for a broad overview of AI security. The book is called Not With a Bug, but With a Sticker: Attacks Against Machine Learning Systems and What to Do About Them. A refrain to the T.S. Eliot, not with bang, but with a whimper. And I want to note that proceeds from this book go to 2 charities that Ram and I care a lot about. One is Black in AI, and one is Bountiful Children's Foundation. Both of these are meant to give more access to education. So these are great charities we care about, and all author proceeds from the book are being donated to those charities.
That's awesome. And I love that you're being so generous that you're giving the proceeds to something that, again, is increasing access to even more education, which is great. And I can attest, I have read the book myself. And also some of our guests have also mentioned it who are not on commission.
Warms my heart.
Hyrum, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
And thanks to all of you for joining us in today's episode of Copilot Lead Speak. Until next time, I'm Sarah Young, and thanks for watching.